It's only expected that amongst one of the best years for gaming this decade, any stinkers were going to float to the top more than ever. After all, the shinier the surface, the more obvious the blemish. It pays to take a look back at which games not only missed the mark, but that serve as a template on what not to do. From broken promises and outright lies to developers removing functionality and crippling their products post-launch, 2016 might have been this generation's strongest so far, but that only makes the following misfires all the more obvious. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 12 worst video games of 2016. Number 12, Star Fox Zero. It doesn't matter how incredible or medium defining your game is, if it controls like hell, we won't stick with it. Such was the life lesson hopefully learned by Nintendo as they attempted to give fans the first home console version of Star Fox in over a decade, yet insisted on building its controls around the Wii U hardware. What could that possibly mean, you ask? Aiming using the gamepad, that's what. But doesn't a shooter need to put focus on pixel-perfect aiming and not holding the pad awkwardly in front of you for the duration? Nah, this is Nintendo we're talking about. You're lucky they didn't insist we suspend ourselves from the ceiling to imitate a barrel roll. Needless to say, forcing players to aim through the gamepad was just annoying, unnecessary, and after a few hours, tiring. Couple that with unremarkable graphics and extremely repetitive gameplay, and it's going to be an even longer wait before another truly great Star Fox game hits our shelves again. Number 11, Quantum Break. Quantum Break should have been f***ing awesome. Another project from the Max Payne and Alan Wake developers Remedy, combining their love for slow-motion action sequences and characters and stories that are more pulpy than a 3-week-old orange squash. Sign me up. Sadly, the final product was a complete mess. A crowbarred-in TV component initially scheduled to launch Microsoft's now-defunct Xbox One TV integration serves only to interrupt play for a good 40 minutes. On the gameplay side, you attempt to make sense of an upcoming apocalyptic scenario where time simply stops, rendering everyone and everything helpless, until you can harness the power of the chrono field and move within it. Cue a ton of awesome-looking suspended animation set pieces that certainly have a unique aesthetic, but that get bogged down by terrible exposition, horrendous acting, said TV component that features better characters than those you play as, and boring basic powers that simply have the word time thrown in front of them. How the hell do you force push someone with time, anyway? Number 10, Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Despite continuing the original's ultra-slick art style, Catalyst didn't focus anywhere near enough on the gameplay parts that worked, instead forcing you into a number of clumsy melee encounters that eventually roadblock the good stuff. Because when it's good, it's great. The sheer rush of wind and blurred colour that zips past you as Faith soars through the City of Glass is truly iconic, but the repetitive side missions, basic story, and terrible final boss only serve to cripple it every single time it's about to break into a sprint. For some reason, EA barely promoted Catalyst at the time of launch, and I'd be surprised if anyone outside of its established cult fanbase even knew it was out. It felt more like they were ticking the box mark to give one of our fanbases what they want, but with the bare minimum of effort, resulting in some admittedly great graphics, but nothing under the hood. Number 9, Homefront The Revolution. Homefront The Revolution really wanted to get some of Far Cry's open-ended structure dollars, resulting in a game that had a carefree, explorative nature, right alongside a great alternate history setup where America is invaded by North Korean forces. This resulted in a really cool take back our country one place at a time style setup, but, like Mirror's Edge, it was forever upended by naff design at every turn. And not just unsatisfying controls, but a confused tone that has oppressive themes which parallel and delve into real-world war-torn countries, sitting next to a gun that shoots fireworks in the colours of the American flag. As you do. Number 8, Street Fighter V. Pushed out of the door so Capcom could have a marquee fighter for their new Pro Tour event, Street Fighter V barely made a dent in the cultural conscious, simply because aside from its online versus mode, the rest of the game was completely unfinished. No arcade ladder, no tutorials, no versus AI option, literally, Pong had such a thing, no story, no challenge modes, the list went on. Only 2016 could be the year where a Street Fighter game releases with less core functionality than Pong. Capcom would eventually add some of these modes in, the game did release back in February, but by then it was all too late. Sadly, despite Street Fighter being bona fide gaming royalty at this point, Capcom rushed everything and prioritized specific features to meet their own money-grubbing needs, rather than those who have stuck by the franchise since day one. Number 7, The Technomancer. An exercise in how to balls up one of the coolest sci-fi narratives we've seen in quite some time, the Technomancer's Mad Max in Space style setup tasked you with policing a turbulent Mars as the titular Technomancers, semi-religious authority figures that double as magic-wielding, bow-staff-flinging badasses. So far, so good. Then you got to the voice acting and the animation, only to find it was drastically, cripplingly outdated. See, as the Technomancer's developers are French, sadly the game suffers the same faux American accents and off-kilter line deliveries as the likes of Quantic Dream's Heavy Rain.
Me too. Thanks, Scott. Means a lot.
Main man Zachariah Mancer, said in the game as Zachariah Mancer, flits between devoting himself to the blind faith of the Technomancers and heading up a rebellion. Yet the necessary strands to convince the player of his allegiance swap are incredibly rushed and just badly acted. Number 6, Deus Ex Mankind Divided. More than any particular genre or game mechanic, the thing we're seeing the rise of this generation are microtransactions. plaguing everything from Overwatch to Assassin's Creed. In a far more egregious and ultimately damaging way, Square Enix, according to an inside source who came clean with Jim Sterling, forced developers Eidos to implement a payment system that totally broke the progression of their game only weeks before launch. No longer did you need to play to unlock Adam Jensen's full roster of abilities. Instead, you could just pay for them, and the money first, passion later approach didn't stop there. Integral DLC was gutted and held back as paid content, resulting in a story that felt incredibly haphazard and badly paced, ending abruptly right when it felt like things were just ramping up. Only a month had passed before the first piece of content then dropped, making it very clear that the game was intentionally segmented to suck up as much money as possible. Number 5, Alekhines Gun. When developers Maximum Games pitched their Cold War espionage thriller, they probably had the best intentions. It's something we'll hopefully see done better if Rockstar ever released their still in development Agent. Yet this game looked like a carbon copy of Hitman Blood Money, albeit without the spit, polish and charm. Now that the full 2016 version of Hitman is out, and it's one of our best games of the year, reverting back to this bygone mess is like being unwillingly dragged through a time machine. Once you got past the great sounding premise, one backed up by hopping between multiple timelines, the reality is that Alekhine just doesn't play very well. Movement is stilted, shooting especially feels like the days before Gears of War when games would struggle to make over-shoulder blasting feel satisfying, and although the open world design spaces everything out, doing so with nothing in between only reinforces the fact that there's nothing there other than the premise itself. A title that succeeds in an on-paper concept alone, sadly not a thing about Alekhines Gun could fulfill its substantial potential. Number 4, almost every monthly PS Plus game. At this stage, the amount of times you check the monthly offerings for PS Plus, sneer and close the store again, drastically outnumber those where you're actually given something genuinely amazing. The issue is, no top-tier publisher wants to give their games away for free, especially on PlayStation, where the console is still making millions. It's why we keep getting mostly forgettable platformers or kid-centric indie titles. Hell, it's why we got Letterquest in November, a game that plays exactly the same on your PS4 Pro as it does on a 2-year-old smartphone. The issue isn't that these games aren't very good, it's that none of them are remotely satisfying showcases of what a PlayStation Plus premium membership should bring. Look to Microsoft's output and you'll find AAA games like Sunset Overdrive and WWE 2K16 right next to a continually impressive catalogue of backwards compatible 360 titles released alongside, every single month. By comparison, Sony expect fans to fork out additional subscription fees to play their favourite old games on the forever stuttering PlayStation Now service. Hopefully 2017 can give PlayStation owners a reason to stick with Sony, otherwise the solid momentum Microsoft continue to accrue may just win the war after all. Number 3, No Man's Sky. As confusing as it is, I've included No Man's Sky over on the best of 2016 list too, simply because from exploration to survival, the scope and scale of the world and its incredible art design, Hello Games did get a lot of things right. Now, that is. Back at launch and for over 3 months, this spacefaring planet hopper was a complete mess. Dogged by unfulfilled promises and features discussed at length on forums as public as late-night talk shows, consumers wasted no time tearing the game asunder for not delivering, which is more than understandable. Finally, again, it took 3 solid months of additional work. No Man's Sky at least has some structure, but that doesn't get away from the fact that there's a spectacular lack of purpose to be found, other than exploring for exploration's sake. And as an object of criticism in the face of everything that game should have been, it creates quite the polarizing end product. Number 2, Bombshell. Born from the apparent need to flesh out the world of Duke Nukem, Bombshell started life with leading lady Shelley Harrison playing a supporting role to the Duke himself, only to spin off into her own game. Sadly, as a result of separating the franchise into its own thing, now Duke belonged to Gearbox, Bombshell changed genres, emerging as a top-down twin-stick shooter with terrible one-liners, overlong execution animations, repetitive combat, and bland levels. 3D Realms went for the whole so bad it's good ideology, but in gaming, these things don't work when the feel of a game is that of a controllable tire fire. Number 1, Mighty No. 9. The biggest stinker of 2016, Mighty No. 9 was supposed to be Auteur Keiji Inafune's return to the beloved Mega Man formula, albeit without the official license. As such, the project was kickstarted into being by fans to the tune of over $4 million, despite developers' concept only asking for $900,000. Following this, development went from being an easily achievable side-scroller to a multi-platform, multiplayer scoreboard-supported mess. In a notably cringeworthy moment, Concept released a spectacularly tone-deaf trailer aimed at, I don't even know, 90s stereotypes of jocks, maybe?
And make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
Berating its core demographic as the drastically outdated mom's basement style of nerd, it only served to add insult to injury, being the game had been delayed repeatedly, eventually releasing to overwhelmingly negative reviews with graphics that looked like they belonged on a PS1. Just take a look at the footage. This cost $4 million. And those are our worst video games of 2016. What do you think? Let me know if I'm right or wrong, and what do you think it should be at number 1? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and I'll see you soon.